Your heart starts racing before a conversation you've been dreading. Your mind just spins, thinking of every way it could go wrong. That feeling, the churn of future fear, it's almost universal. But imagine walking into that room not with anxiety, but with a calm, unshakable readiness. About 2,000 years ago, the Stoic philosopher Seneca had a surprising idea. He wrote that what's unlooked for is more crushing, that unexpectedness adds weight to a disaster. His answer was a mental exercise called Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. This isn't pessimism. It's a disciplined practice of visualizing potential setbacks to dismantle their power before they ever happen. So by the end of this, you'll have a complete toolkit to focused resilience. We'll look at the psychology behind why visualizing bad outcomes actually calms the mind, and walk through the exact steps the Stoics used to build an inner fortress. How could mentally rehearsing disaster lead to greater peace? What if your deepest anxieties could become your greatest source of strength? There's a common idea that this is expecting the worst. But that's not it. There's a real difference between worry and what the Stoics called Premeditatio Malorum. Worry is passive. It's a storm of fear. It leaves you feeling powerless. Premeditatio is active. It's a structured rehearsal. You do it with a clear mind. Its purpose in Stoicism is threefold. First, to inoculate the soul. So when hardship comes, it feels familiar, not catastrophic. Second, to create appreciation for the present. By acknowledging things could be otherwise, you see what you have. You see it clearly. And third, to test your preparedness. To ask, if this happened, what would I do? Seneca wrote about this. He said we should rehearse misfortune in our minds. Not to dwell on it, but to weaken its force through familiarity. He said we suffer more in imagination than in reality. This exercise is the remedy. Think of two people before a job interview. One is caught in a loop of worry, thinking, I'll freeze up, they won't like me, it's a disaster. Their energy is drained by fear. The other practices premeditatio. They sit calmly, they think, okay, what if the interviewer is difficult? I'll stay polite. I'll focus on my answers. What if I forget a point? I have my notes. This mental walkthrough doesn't create fear. It creates a map. The anxiety of the unknown gets replaced by a quiet catalog of responses. So here's a prompt. Think of one area in your life where you get lost in that cycle of worry, and consider how you might approach it with this structured visualization, not to feed the fear, but to disarm it piece by piece, turning vague dread into specific, manageable scenarios. This wasn't some abstract philosophy. It was a daily practice for the Stoics. A routine, like a soldier maintaining his gear. Every morning, Seneca would sit quietly. He wasn't planning his day. He was walking through what could go wrong. A tough talk with someone, bad news arriving, an illness. He pictured these things not to feel worse, but to feel ready. By seeing them clearly, he took away the surprise. And surprise is what makes suffering worse. Marcus Aurelius did the same thing. The emperor, he'd start his day by telling himself, the people I'll meet will be difficult. Ungrateful, arrogant, that wasn't being cynical. It was preparation, a way to face them with patience, not anger, with calm. This mental practice was the step toward loving your fate. Amor Fati, it's not about wanting bad things. It's about accepting what could happen so deeply that when it does, you don't fight it internally. You embrace the day for what it is. All its possible complications. Roman generals used this before a battle. They'd imagine the chaos, a flank giving way, the noise and confusion, so they could stay calm in the middle of it. Make clear decisions because the shock was already gone. A merchant might think about his ship going down, not to focus on the loss, but to remember his peace wasn't tied to that cargo. So for a modern version, before you look at your phone, you sit for a minute, you walk through the day, that meeting you're nervous about, the traffic that will test you, the project getting tough feedback. You don't just see the event, you see yourself responding calmly, choosing your words, taking a breath in the car. Hearing the feedback without taking it personally, that simple act changes everything. You stop just receiving the day, you start participating in it. What happens when we imagine failure systematically? There's a principle in psychology from exposure therapy. In a clinical setting, gradual exposure to a feared thing in safety reduces that fear. Premeditatio Malorum is like that, a cognitive exposure we do ourselves. We bring a hardship to mind deliberately, calmly. We expose the nervous system to the idea without the real danger. There's an initial spike of anxiety, but because we control the narrative, we can sit with that feeling until it softens. Repeated mental exposure desensitizes us. The thought of a difficult conversation loses its edge because we've already had that conversation a dozen times in our mind, and we survived. This process also builds mental schemas. A schema is a cognitive blueprint, a prepared plan for a type of event. When something unexpected happens, we scramble to make a new plan under stress. But if we've visualized a version of that event, we have a schema ready. The crisis feels less like an ambush, more like a scenario we have a protocol for. This connects to Epictetus, his dichotomy of control. The purpose of the visualization is to achieve clarity on what is within our power and what is not. If you mentally walk through a fear of public speaking, you see what you cannot control. You cannot control if the projector fails. You cannot control a bored audience member. You cannot control the unexpected question, but you can control having a backup plan for the slides. You can control your breath and your focus if you see a disengaged face. You can control having a phrase ready for a question you can't answer. Something like, "That's an excellent point, I'd like to consider further." Visualization forces this separation. It shines a light on the small, manageable circle of your own actions, surrounded by the vast, chaotic world of external events. So take a fear that feels overwhelming now. A financial worry, a concern about a relationship, anxiety about a health checkup. Instead of letting it be a monolithic cloud of dread, break it into specific, visualizable components. If it's a financial fear, mentally walk through the specific scenario. What would the first step be? Who would you talk to? What practical adjustment would you make today? By moving it from a vague feeling to a series of concrete, challenging steps, you are not inviting disaster. You are building the schema. You are conducting the exposure. You are drawing the line with steady hands between what is yours to manage and what is not. That's how the Stoic mind transforms fear into the architecture of resilience. A vague fear of failure can stop you completely. The Stoic approach is to define that fear with exact detail. That's the necessary first step, and it's where most people get stuck. We say we're afraid of losing a job or a relationship ending or getting sick, but those are just labels. They're big, dark clouds of anxiety. They have no edges, so they expand to fill all the space in your mind. The Stoic exercise, Premeditatio Malorum, tells you to stop at the label. It asks you to dissect it with wisdom, what they called seeing things as they truly are, stripping away the opinion and the illusion. You have to move from the abstract to the concrete, from the terrifying "what if" to the manageable "if then." Seneca wrote about this in his essay on the tranquility of mind. He said we are often more frightened than hurt, that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. His advice was to limit the fear by looking at it directly. He wrote, "Let all your efforts be directed to something, let it keep that end in view. It's not enough to be busy, so are the ants. The question is, what are we busy about?" In this case, the something is the specific, defined scenario. You are busy defining the boundaries of the disaster, so it can't be infinite. So here's a practical way to do it. First, identify the vague fear. Let's say it's, "I'm afraid my business will fail." That's the cloud. Second, write down the worst-case scenario, but only as far as is realistically probable. This isn't about imagining a fantastical ruin, but the plausible next steps. So the defined scenario might be, in 3 months, if revenue doesn't improve, I will have to let my one employee go and move the business back into my home office to cut costs. I will need to have a difficult conversation and my personal income will be reduced. Notice the difference. The first statement, "My business will fail," is a monolith. It triggers a helpless panic. The second is a series of specific, challenging events. It triggers problem solving. You can visualize the conversation. You can research home office setups. You can review your budget. The fear is now contained within a narrative you can actually work with. That's the Stoic precision. It transforms the unknown into the known. It replaces the question, "What will I do if everything falls apart?" with the question, "What will I do if this specific thing happens?" The first question has no answer, the second one does. So here's the challenge. Take one of those background fears you carry, the one that whispers to you at night. And for the next minute, don't just feel it, define it. Write down the single, most specific worst-case outcome you are actually afraid of. Not the end of the world, but the next difficult chapter. By giving it a name and a shape, you've already begun the work of taking away its power. You've started to build the schema, and with that clear, if difficult, picture in mind, you can move to the next phase. The Stoics weren't imagining the storm itself, they were imagining themselves standing firm in the middle of it. That's the pivot, the external event, the disaster. It's almost secondary. The focus is your own inner response. You're not rehearsing the bad news, you're rehearsing your own character when it arrives. You're building what they called the inner citadel. A fortress of mind built from virtue and reason, and no outside circumstance can breach it. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this constantly. In his private journal, he'd remind himself over and over to return to his own ruling principle. His hegemonicon, no matter what chaos happened around him, wars, betrayals, plagues, his task was to retreat into that inner fortress and act from that place of clarity. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you find strength. The strength comes from knowing deeply that you can't control the event. But you absolutely can control your interpretation of it and your action in response." So the visualization shifts. It's no longer, "What if I get that dreaded phone call?" It becomes, "If I get that phone call, I will pause. I'll take a deliberate breath. I'll feel the initial wave of emotion, but I won't be swept away by it. Then I'll ask myself, what's the next right action? Who needs to be informed? What practical step comes first?" You're mentally constructing the neural pathways for calm, for courage, for rational next steps. You're not feeding fear, you're feeding resilience. For a modern example, think of preparing for a difficult performance review. The unhelpful visualization is a loop of your manager's disapproving face, a sense of shame, a spiraling fear. The Stoic Premeditatio reframes it. You visualize sitting in that chair, hearing critical feedback. You see yourself listening fully without defensiveness. You feel the urge to justify rising up, and you visualize consciously setting it aside. You see yourself asking a clarifying question. Then later, calmly creating a plan to address the points raised. You're not visualizing a perfect outcome where no criticism exists. You're visualizing your own impeccable conduct within an imperfect situation. So here's a question to sit with. When you imagine a challenge ahead, are you picturing the problem, or are you picturing yourself handling the problem with strength and composure? The entire power of this tool is in making that shift. Focus your mental rehearsal not on the chaos of the world, but on the unshakable clarity you can cultivate inside. By giving something up in your mind, you start to see what you actually have. That's the quiet contradiction in this Stoic practice. Premeditatio Malorum isn't only a defense against fear later on. It's also a reflection of what's here now. It reveals the plenty we miss every day. The Stoics named this the via negativa, the negative path. You don't just list your blessings. You feel them being gone clearly in your imagination, and in that empty space you create, their worth becomes obvious. Seneca did this on purpose. He had enormous wealth, but he would sometimes take a few days to live as if it was all lost. He'd wear rough clothes, eat very plain food, sleep on a hard bed. This wasn't self-punishment. It was a test of how he saw things. He wrote that by doing this, he would never be afraid of what he could often withstand. And more than that, he'd come back to his regular life not feeling it was owed to him, but with a solid, real thankfulness for the ease he usually ignored. Epictetus had a softer, sharper version. He told his students to kiss their children good night with the quiet knowledge that they will die. That sounds grim, but the point isn't sorrow. It's a direction to feel how precious the moment is, to not let the hug be routine, but to let it hold the full understanding of its temporary, irreplaceable nature. The practice works because our brains adapt. We get accustomed to anything good. A warm house, a car that works, someone who loves us, our own health. These become the background hum. We stop hearing the song, but by mentally stopping that song, even briefly, we suddenly hear the quiet, and when the song comes back, we hear it fresh. So here's something simple you can do where you are. Close your eyes for a minute. Picture, with as much detail as possible, that the roof over you is gone. The walls, the comfort, the safety, all of it. See yourself without that basic shelter. Feel that exposure just for a few seconds, then open your eyes. Look at the room you're in. Feel the solidness of the walls, the enclosure. What comes over you then? That's not just relief, that's gratitude turned on by its opposite. It's the abundance shown through a loss you imagined on purpose. Today, choose one ordinary comfort. Something so fundamental you never consider it, like running water. For a moment, mentally let it go. Imagine the faucet gives nothing. The simple act of washing your hands becomes a difficult task. Then turn the tap on. Watch the water run. That change in how you see it, from expectation to thankfulness, is the trigger firing. It makes the everyday into something extraordinary. And it builds a reserve of satisfaction that outside events can't easily take away. Stoic theory becomes practice here. You're visualizing a scenario, and now you need to sort it. The tool for that is the dichotomy of control. It turns the exercise into a training of focus. The idea is simple, but applying it changes everything. Epictetus opens his handbook with it. He writes, "Some things are within our power and some things are not. Our opinions, our impulses, our desires, our aversions, these are within our power. Our body, property, reputation, public office, these are not. The chief task," he says, "is to identify and separate matters, to say to every external thing, you are nothing to me." That's the sorting you do during Premeditatio. You walk through the challenge and you label each part. Is this within my power or is it not? Take the job interview. You've visualized walking in. You see the interviewer, their demeanor, their expressions, the questions they ask, their mood that day, all outside your control. You can't command their reaction, but your own preparation, your breath as you sit down, the clarity of your answers, your choice to listen, your decision to remain polite, these are within your power. The practice is to touch each element and assign its category. This does two things. First, it stops the mental energy leak. When you worry about the interviewer being dismissive, you note, that's not within my control. You redirect effort toward what is, like rehearsing your points. Second, it builds emotional resilience. When the event happens and the interviewer is difficult, your mind doesn't see it as a personal failure. It's an external event, one you had already categorized. Your energy stays with your own performance, your own virtue. So in a real session, after defining your fear, you walk through the steps. Pause at each juncture, say it to yourself. If I present my idea and my colleague criticizes it, that's their reaction, not within my control. My controlled response is to thank them, ask for specifics, decide if their point has merit. If I'm late to a meeting because of traffic, the traffic is not controlled. My controlled action is to call ahead, apologize upon arrival, refocus my mind to be present. This act of sorting is the discipline. It trains the mind to stop clinging to outcomes it can't guarantee and to invest in the quality of its own actions. After your next mental rehearsal, write down 2 short lists. On one side, what in that scenario was outside your control. On the other, what was firmly within it. Look at that second list. That's your domain. That's where your power lies and where your peace is built. Resolve to pour your energy there. The noise of the world begins to fade. Okay, the thing you're afraid of actually happens. So then what? That's the question. It's the most important one, because our worst fears, they're like a story that just stops at the worst part. The bad news, the rejection, the goodbye, we freeze it right there, but life doesn't freeze, it keeps going, and this practice, it makes you press play. You have to follow the disaster all the way through, not to get stuck in it, but to see what's on the other side. You walk past the loud, terrible moment and into the quiet that comes after. You see the ordinary reality. The Stoics had a view on this. Marcus Aurelius said the obstacle becomes the way. It's not an ending, it's the material for a new path. So when you ask, and then what, you're not saying it isn't hard, you're admitting it is, and then you're looking for the way forward it creates. You're looking for the point where you can actually do something. Where your own response can engage with this new situation. The big, scary event starts to break down into steps, difficult steps, but steps you can take. The disaster is the storm, asking and then what is how you start building the shelter in your mind. Take an example. Say you're afraid of losing your job. The catastrophic image is the meeting. You're let go, you feel the shock, so you ask, okay, I lost my job, and then what? I go home, I tell my family. I feel whatever I feel, and then what? The next morning I make coffee, I sit down, I update my resume, and then what? I look at my finances, I make a basic budget. I message a few people to meet for coffee, and then what? I apply for a couple jobs, I go for a walk, something shifts. The one big, terrifying event, it unfolds into a timeline. It becomes actions, simple, mundane things you can do. You're not picturing yourself as ruined, you're picturing yourself handling it, one step, then the next. You find your own resilience in that story. This connects to what the Stoics said about control. Every and then what forces you to find the next thing you can do. It moves your focus from what you can't control, the decision to lay you off, to what you can, updating the resume, managing your state of mind, asking for help. The questions pull you out of the helplessness of that first moment and into the agency of what comes after. You're writing the script of your own response. So take your fear, the specific one you defined earlier, apply this chain to it now, in your head, or write it down, start the sentence, okay, the thing I fear happens. And then what? Write the next logical step, and then what? Keep following it. Go until you see yourself not just surviving but adapting, having a hard conversation. Making a new plan, calling a friend, learning something new. Follow it until you see yourself back on your own 2 feet. What you'll probably find is the monster under the bed, in the full light of day, is just a set of problems you can solve. And you can solve them. The fear loses its power when you see the whole story, not just the scary part. The Stoics had this phrase for every disaster, this too shall pass. It wasn't just comfort, it was part of the structure. You don't just see the hardship, you see its end. You see where it sits in the long flow of your life. That view of impermanence makes suffering feel smaller, because what feels permanent in the moment is usually just an event, a difficult chapter, not the whole story. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this all the time. He'd look at the universe and see constant change. He'd remind himself that even the memory of important people will fade. He wrote that all things of the body stream away like a river. Things of the mind are dreams and delusion. Life is warfare and a journey in a strange land. But the point for practice is this: if the whole cosmos is in flux, then your crisis is temporary by nature. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Premeditatio Malorum asks you to hold that truth in the center of the rehearsal. You're not just walking through the storm, you're reminding yourself with every step that the storm will clear. That changes the experience. Pain becomes something you move through, not a place you live. Loss becomes a season, not a permanent winter. So in the visualization, you add this last layer. Take a professional failure. You've defined it, you've sorted control, you've asked, and then what? Now you go further. You see yourself right after feeling the sting. But then you consciously fast forward. You picture 1 week later. The initial shock has softened. You're having a normal coffee, thinking more clearly. Jump to 1 month later. You've had a few conversations. You're seeing new possibilities. Visualize 6 months later. You're in a new project, having learned from the experience. You're different, maybe stronger in a specific way. Doing this accomplishes 2 things. First, it reduces the catastrophic weight of the present moment. It's no longer the final word. It's a point on a longer line. Second, it primes your mind for resilience and growth. You're rehearsing not just survival, but recovery and adaptation. You're wiring your brain to expect a comeback. So here's a simple way to close any visualization. After you've walked through the scenario, pause and say out loud or in a firm internal voice, "This is a moment in time." It will change. That statement is your anchor. It pulls you out of the illusion of permanence that fear creates. It grounds you in the Stoic reality of constant flux. Nothing lasts forever, not even disaster, and knowing that, feeling it in your bones, might be the most powerful form of courage you can build. Premeditatio Malorum is a rehearsal stage. It's a private space where you practice becoming the person you want to be under pressure. We've talked about resilience, about weathering the storm. But the Stoics aimed higher. Their goal wasn't just to endure hardship. It was to move through it with virtue, to act with courage, justice, wisdom, and temperance. Especially when it's hardest. So this final layer changes the mental theater. It's no longer about what happens to you. It's about who you choose to be while it's happening. Instead of just visualizing yourself getting through a difficult conversation or a professional setback, you script yourself navigating it with character. The visualization becomes an ethical test. At each point you ask, what would the wise person do here? Not a perfect mythical sage, the best version of yourself, guided by principle. The Stoics held up the ideal of the sage as a compass, not a finish line, and we use mental rehearsal to practice walking in that direction, especially when the path is rocky. Take a common workplace conflict. You visualize a colleague presenting your idea as their own in a meeting. The initial raw reaction is anger, a desire to call them out publicly, to make a scene. That's the unexamined impulse. The Stoic rehearsal asks you to pause that script. You rerun the scene. You feel the heat of injustice, but you don't let it dictate your action. You see yourself waiting calmly. After the meeting, you request a private word. You state the facts clearly without accusation. You say, "I noticed the concept you presented was very similar to the proposal I shared with you last week. I'd like to understand how you developed it further." That response is rooted in justice, seeking what is fair, and temperance, exercising self-control. It's firm but not destructive. You've rehearsed not just a reaction but a principled action, or consider a personal temptation. You're on a strict budget, but friends pressure you into an expensive outing. The easy path is to give in, to avoid the social friction. In your premeditatio, you visualize that moment of pressure, and then you rehearse acting with self-discipline. You see yourself smiling, staying connected, but saying clearly, "I'm passing on this one, but I'd love to join for the next affordable plan." you rehearse the slight discomfort of saying no. And you link it to the greater good of your own integrity and goals. You're building the neural pathway for temperance, so here's a prompt to carry forward. In your next visualization, shift the goal. Don't just aim to survive the event. Script yourself acting with the character you most admire. When the bad news comes, how does a courageous person listen? When you are wronged, how does a just person respond? When you are tempted, how does a disciplined person choose? This turns fear into an opportunity. For moral craftsmanship, every imagined challenge becomes a rehearsal for wisdom. It shapes not just your outcomes, but your very soul. This is a sharp tool. And if you use it wrong, it can cut you. So we need guardrails. Any powerful mental practice has a risk if you misunderstand it. The line between Stoic rehearsal and anxious rumination is thin. But it's crucial. It's like the difference between a surgeon's scalpel and a weapon. Both are sharp. One heals, the other harms. The purpose of Premeditatio Malorum is to inoculate you against fear, not to inject more of it. So you have to learn to spot when the practice turns against itself. When visualization becomes a morbid obsession, the differences are clear. Stoic rehearsal is controlled. You decide when it starts, you decide when it ends. It's a deliberate session, maybe 5 minutes in the morning. Anxious rumination is compulsive. It hijacks your mind at random hours. It loops endlessly, and it does it without your permission. The Stoic version is focused on your response. The central question is, if this happens, how will I act? With virtue, with reason. The anxious version is fixated on the event itself, on the terrible thing occurring. It plays the catastrophe on repeat, and it never moves to a solution. Then the Stoic exercise ends with acceptance, a quiet, if this is what fate brings, I am ready. The anxious spiral has no end, it just tightens, it leads to more fear, more helplessness, more suffering in imagination. Seneca championed this practice, but he also gave the warning. He wrote about moderation in all things, even in our exercises of wisdom. He cautioned against dwelling too long on dark thoughts. The mind needs nourishment from brighter ideas too. The goal is to visit hardship in your mind, not to move in and live there. It's a brief, purposeful reconnaissance mission into difficult territory, not a permanent deployment. You can see this in practical terms. A proper application looks like this. You sit down with a clear intention. Today, I'll visualize the possibility of my presentation not going well. For 5 minutes, you walk through the scenario. You see the disengaged faces, you feel your own nervousness, and you rehearse your response, taking a breath, simplifying your point, asking a question to re-engage. Then you close the session, you stand up and move on with your day, and you feel lighter, more prepared. The misapplication looks utterly different. It's lying in bed at night, your mind racing. The presentation morphs, you forget your words, people laugh, you lose your job, financial ruin, a cascade of vague, interconnected disasters. There's no structure, no focus on response, no time limit. It's a free-fall of worry, and it leaves you exhausted, not empowered. So here's a simple check-in. Does your mental practice feel like purposeful training? Like a soldier calmly cleaning his rifle? Or does it feel like being trapped in a worry loop, like a hamster on a wheel going nowhere? The feeling in your body and mind is your guide. Purposeful training brings a sense of solidity. Even if the topic is difficult, it ends with a release. The worry loop brings tension, fatigue, a sense of dread that lingers and grows. If you find yourself in the second category, the remedy is to return to the structure. Set a timer, choose one specific scenario, not a cloud of them, and relentlessly bring the focus back to your circle of control, your next right action, your next virtuous choice. This tool is for building your inner citadel, not for laying siege to it. The Stoics treated this like a daily drill, a kind of mental hygiene. Marcus Aurelius did it as a morning meditation. He'd sit before dawn and prepare for the day's frictions. He wrote that when you wake up, you should tell yourself, the people you meet today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, surly. That wasn't cynicism, it was about setting expectations so you wouldn't be surprised, so you wouldn't be derailed. He was doing his Premeditatio. The goal is to make it a brief, consistent habit. Not a long session, just 3 to 5 minutes in the morning. The structure is simple. First, when you wake up with a clear mind, pick one challenge the day might hold. A difficult conversation, a tight deadline, a social obligation you're dreading. Second, visualize the worst plausible outcome, not a fantasy disaster. The realistic, tough version, see it clearly. Third, and this is the pivot, visualize your own calm response. See yourself navigating it with patience. With logic, with courage, the power is in the pairing. You expose yourself to the hardship, and then you immediately rehearse your own strength. This isn't dwelling on the negative. It's inoculating your nervous system. Think of it as a mental vaccination, a small, controlled dose of the virus, followed by the immune response. You're training the reaction you want. So a template, say to yourself, today I have that feedback session. I'll visualize it going poorly. They become defensive, their voice raises. Then I visualize myself staying grounded. I take a slow breath. I listen without interrupting. I acknowledge their frustration before calmly restating the issue. My tone stays even. I focus on finding a solution, not winning an argument. That's the whole practice, brevity and consistency. 5 minutes of focused rehearsal is more powerful than 30 minutes of scattered worry. You're building a neural pathway. A default setting for composure. The challenge is to commit to this daily drill for 1 week. Each morning, pick one thing, walk through the scenario and your response. Then go about your day, see what happens to your baseline anxiety. Does the feared event feel lighter? Do you find yourself slipping into the rehearsed response almost automatically? This is how philosophy moves from the page into your daily life. It becomes not something you know, but something you do. The Stoics had this phrase they used. They called it the reserve clause, in Latin, exceptio. It's the verbal part of the mental rehearsal. It's how you state your ambition, while quietly accepting the final result isn't yours to command. It's a safety net of acceptance under all your effort. You pursue a goal with everything you have, but you add a quiet condition to your intent. You add the words fate permitting. Or if nothing prevents me. This isn't a lack of confidence, it's realism. It's aligning your will with nature, which includes obstacles and interruptions. And sudden changes. Seneca wrote about this. He said we should undertake all actions with a reservation. He said, I will sail across the ocean if nothing prevents me. I will become a magistrate if nothing hinders. That if clause is everything, it acknowledges the vast network of cause and effect outside our small circle of control. Epictetus taught the same thing. He told his students to aim for a goal like an archer aims for a target. The archer's job is to take careful aim, to execute the shot with skill. But once the arrow leaves the bow, a gust of wind can intervene, or a moving target. 100 things can happen. The good archer does everything within their power and then accepts the outcome with equanimity. The reserve clause is that acceptance built into the action from the start. In your visualization, this changes the script. You're not just picturing the successful outcome. You're also picturing calmly the plan being interrupted, and you're rehearsing your peaceful pivot. For example, you visualize preparing for a big trip. You see yourself packing, feeling excited. You add the reserve clause, I will take this trip, fate permitting. Then, in your mind, you briefly visualize the interruption. A flight cancellation, an unexpected obligation. You see yourself getting the news, feeling the initial disappointment, and then adjusting, looking at alternative dates. Making the best of a quiet weekend at home. By embedding this possibility into your plan, you disarm the frustration. The goal was pursued with reservation, so its alteration isn't a personal failure. It's just life unfolding. So take a current goal, say it out loud, then add the clause, I will finish this project by Friday if nothing prevents me. I will have a productive meeting though the other person may be in a difficult mood. I am prepared for either outcome. The shift is in the mind. The goal is no longer a rigid demand on the universe. It becomes a preferred outcome, pursued with excellence, while your peace remains tied to the quality of your effort, not the final result. So formulate a goal you're working toward right now. In your mind, attach the Stoic reserve clause to it. Say it to yourself. Feel how that simple phrase, fate permitting, creates a space around your ambition. A space for acceptance to live. It turns striving into a harmonious endeavor. You strive with your whole heart, yet your serenity is held in reserve, untouched by the changing winds of external results. For a lot of people, the deepest fears are social ones, the fear of being thought a fraud, the fear of rejection, and it's not just public speaking, it's that quieter, constant hum. Wondering if we belong, if what we bring is welcome. The Stoic exercise Premeditatio Malorum fits this perfectly, because social fears are often the most vague. And that vagueness is what gives them power. They thrive in the shadows, in what we haven't defined. So you bring them into the light. You use the same steps, but with a crucial shift. The goal isn't to control how others see you. That's outside your control. The goal is to rehearse holding your self-respect steady, no matter what the external reaction is. You start by defining the specific fear, move it from a cloud of anxiety to a clear picture. It's not just, I'm afraid of being judged. It becomes, I'm afraid that tomorrow, when I share my new business idea in the team meeting, my colleague will dismiss it with a sarcastic comment. And others will laugh. That's a scene you can work with. Now you visualize it, see the room, hear the tone of the comment, feel the heat in your face. This is the exposure. You let yourself feel the sting in a safe space so its surprise is gone. Then comes the pivot, the Stoic response. You visualize yourself in that same moment, not crumbling but anchoring. You take a breath, you feel the urge to shrink or to retaliate, and you consciously choose neither. You see yourself keeping a calm demeanor. Maybe you nod and say, I appreciate the perspective, let me think on that. The critical part is what you visualize happening inside. You rehearse the internal monologue. Their laughter is about their own discomfort, not my worth. My value isn't determined by this single reaction. I shared an idea with courage, and that action in itself was virtuous. Epictetus has the core insight here. He said it's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. The event is someone laughing. The judgment we add is that this laughter means I am foolish, unworthy, and should never speak again. That judgment is the source of the suffering. Premeditatio lets us challenge that judgment ahead of time, rewrite it. We rehearse the event with a new, wiser judgment. The judgment that someone's negative reaction is information about their perspective, not a verdict on my soul. Take a modern example. Posting creative work online. The fear of harsh comments can be paralyzing. Apply the practice before you hit post. Do a brief, controlled visualization. Define the fear. I am afraid someone will comment that this is derivative and unoriginal. Visualize seeing that comment pop up. Feel the initial punch to the gut. Then, immediately visualize your response. You read it. You acknowledge the feedback without internalizing it as truth. You think this is one person's opinion. It does not undo the hours of effort I invested. It does not make the act of creation worthless. You might even visualize typing a polite, non-defensive reply. Thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts. Or you visualize simply closing the tab, moving on with your day, your sense of purpose intact. You've rehearsed keeping your internal worth separate from the external noise. So here's a prompt. Identify your chief social fear right now. Is it asking for a raise? Sharing a personal story, going to a gathering where you might feel out of place, take 2 minutes. Define the specific, worst plausible social outcome. Then visualize it, and crucially, visualize yourself moving through it with your dignity and self-respect firmly in your own hands. See yourself caring more about your own integrity in the moment than about the approval you may or may not get. This single, controlled rehearsal can cut the tension of that fear in half, because you're no longer fleeing from a phantom. You're walking toward a challenge you've already faced and met in the quiet theater of your own mind. Stoicism was something wealthy Romans practiced. People like Seneca, they understood material security is fragile. They trained their minds for that. It wasn't about rejecting comfort. It was a conscious detachment, not letting comfort define you. Our modern anxieties, they often crystallize around money, around possessions, the fear of a job loss. A market crash, a car that dies, a house needing a major repair. These fears feel immediate, they feel tangible. Premeditatio Malorum asks you to walk directly into them. Not to manifest disaster, to prove to yourself you can handle more than you think. The goal is to separate your sense of identity from those external assets. Your core tranquility, to see that if they were gone, you would remain. Your character, your resourcefulness, your capacity for reason, those are the true possessions. They cannot be repossessed. The philosopher Musonius Rufus taught that external wealth is on loan from fortune. It comes and goes. True wealth, he argued, is in the soul's excellence. Seneca, with all his riches, wrote about this constantly. He said we should love our possessions as travelers love a room at an inn. You appreciate it. You use it, but you're always aware it's temporary. You are not the innkeeper, you're just passing through. That mindset transforms how you hold things. They become useful tools, not extensions of your self-worth. So applying the rehearsal, you start with a specific material fear, not the vague fear of being poor. That's too broad, define it. I am afraid my car, which I rely on for work, will break down next month, with a repair cost I can't easily afford. Now visualize the scenario. Hear the strange noise, feel the sinking feeling as you pull over. See the mechanic's estimate, that's the exposure. You let yourself feel the stress of the moment. Then you pivot, you visualize your response, you take a breath, you assess your options. Can you use public transit for a week? Can you arrange a ride share with a colleague? Can you negotiate a payment plan? You see yourself making the calls, adjusting your schedule, solving the practical puzzle. The event shifts from a personal catastrophe to a logistical challenge. Your identity isn't tied to a functioning car. Your identity is the person who solves problems when the car breaks down. Consider a larger fear like job loss. Visualize the meeting, hear the words, feel the initial shock, then guide the visualization forward. You go home, you sit with the emotion. The next day, you make a list. You update your professional profile, you reach out to your network, you look at your savings, you create a bare-bones budget. You see yourself taking a part-time job you never considered. Discovering a skill you'd forgotten you had. You are rehearsing resilience. You are proving to your own mind that you are more than your title. Your worth is not your salary. Your capability to adapt, to persevere, to learn, that is unassailable. So a reflective prompt. What possession or financial status do you most fear losing? Not in an abstract sense, the specific one that whispers to you in quiet moments. Now take a few minutes, visualize its loss in clear, plausible detail. Then go further, visualize the person you would have to become to navigate that new reality. Resourceful, adaptable, perhaps simpler in your needs but clearer in your priorities. See that person is you, stripped of a temporary comfort but fortified by an inner wealth. A wealth no market can crash. This mental rehearsal doesn't bring loss. It reveals an enduring strength you already possess, waiting beneath the surface of your fears. One of our most basic fears is for the body. Stoicism doesn't avoid that. It looks right at it. The body is fragile, it ages, it gets sick, it feels pain, and pretending it won't is a kind of lie. The Stoics called that out. So they used a tool, Premeditatio Malorum, for this, to build strength against the fact of the body. The point isn't to get morbid, it's to take the terror out of the unknown. To swap a chaotic fear of what might happen for a rehearsed response, for if it does, the practice needs a careful hand. You guide your mind to a health challenge. Maybe a chronic diagnosis or an injury that changes how you move. The rehearsal isn't about the pain itself or the graphic details. That doesn't help. It's about your character in the middle of it. You visualize getting the news. You feel that first shock, the cold fear. Then you practice the turn. You see yourself taking a breath. You focus on the next thing, making the follow-up appointment, listening to the doctor, asking clear questions. You're rehearsing patience in waiting rooms. Following advice even when it's hard, keeping a learning mind about your own body. And you visualize appreciating the wellness that's left or that comes back. The sun on a good day, one deep, easy breath. This pulls your focus from the huge landscape of the illness to the small path of your own response. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this. He wrote much of his meditations on campaign, often sick. He didn't ignore his body. He put it into his philosophy. He wrote, "You may lose everything but your mind. You have power over your mind, not outside events. See that, and you find strength." His focus was the duty to live well with the nature he was given. A body that gets sick is just part of that nature. The task isn't to rage against it, it's to tend to it with reason and to keep the mind in order, no matter the state of the walls around it. For a practical start, use a temporary challenge. Visualize a bad flu. You're in bed, everything aches, you can't focus. The normal reaction is frustration, resentment. The Stoic rehearsal is different. You see yourself acknowledging the discomfort without adding mental suffering to it. You practice the discipline of real rest, not fighting your body's need to heal. You use the quiet to listen to a book, to watch your thoughts without being run by them. You cultivate gratitude for your usual health, making a note to never take a simple walk for granted again. This isn't about enjoying the flu. It's about moving through it with a mind that stays your own. So here's a prompt. Think of your health not as a permanent given, but as a temporary condition. Everything is, in a quiet moment, ask, if a physical challenge came, how would you want to meet it? Not with denial or panic, with a steady focus on what's in your power. Your attitude, your follow-through with care, your thanks for small mercies. Rehearse that meeting once. See yourself as a patient student of your own body. Resilient not because you're unbreakable, but because you've already faced the fear of breaking and found what doesn't shake. Premeditatio builds immunity. Amor Fati is that immunity. It's a deeper change. It's not just managing fear, it's rewiring your relationship with reality. Amor Fati means loving your fate. It's a Stoic idea. You embrace what life brings, not with resignation, with an active welcome. You see a hardship, a setback. You say yes to it, not because you wanted it, but because it's the material you have now. Your character is built by working with that material. Rehearsing difficulties trains you for this acceptance. You visualize disasters calmly. You do something powerful. You train your mind to see any outcome as raw material, good or bad. The event itself starts to matter less. What matters is your engagement with it. The feared scenario loses its power to shock you because you've already made peace with its possibility in your mind. You've already lived through aversion. You found your footing. So when reality brings something similar, it doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like a scenario you're prepared to meet. To learn from, Friedrich Nietzsche adopted this idea. He wrote that his formula for greatness is amor fati, that you want nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. This radical acceptance is Stoic. It echoes Marcus Aurelius. He wrote of accepting what the nature of the whole brings, to welcome every event, not as a disruption to his plan, but as the plan itself. The universe is weaving a larger tapestry. Your thread is part of the design, even the dark ones. Your job isn't to curse the color. It's to weave it in with strength. An athlete prepares for a race. They use premeditatio. They don't just visualize winning, they visualize a poor start. They visualize hitting the wall. They visualize coming in second or third. They walk through the disappointment, the physical drain, the media questions. By accepting that possibility, they strip it of its distracting power. On race day, they can focus on their form, their strategy, their effort, the things they control. And when the result comes, whatever it is, they can embrace it. A loss becomes not a failure, but a crucial lesson. It refines their training. That's Amor Fati in action. Loving the fate that includes the loss because it's now part of their story, their growth. So think of a past difficulty, a rejection, a closed door. Can you see one you're now grateful for? A job you didn't get led you to a better path. A relationship that ended created space for growth. A failure taught you a resilience you rely on. That hindsight gratitude is a glimpse of Amor Fati. Premeditatio aims to bring that acceptance forward into the present moment for possibilities that haven't happened yet. It asks you to look at a future fear and say, if this comes to pass, I will find a way to endure it, to eventually see its necessity in the fabric of my life. You begin to meet the future not with dread, but with a quiet readiness for whatever thread the universe hands you next. The Stoics didn't think disasters were random. They saw them as threads in a larger tapestry. That's the cosmological view. It gives premeditatio its context. It's not just a psychological trick, it's a philosophical alignment. They believed the universe was governed by a rational principle, the logos, divine reason, an intelligent, weaving force. It connects all events into a coherent whole. Nothing happens by accident. Nothing happens outside this natural law. Even personal catastrophes, from a cosmic vantage point, they're necessary stitches in the fabric. So when you visualize a hardship, you're not just preparing for a trial. You're contemplating a possible expression of the logos itself. That mental step back changes the exercise. It moves you from asking why this is happening to you, to seeing this is happening as part of the whole, and your role is to play your part well. Marcus Aurelius returned to this constantly. He wrote notes to himself, urging a broader perspective. He said to frequently consider the connection of all things in the universe. He reminded himself to view human affairs from above, to see the cities, the farms, the marriages, the illnesses, all of it as brief events in the vast flow of time. He wrote that what happens to you was destined for you, woven with you from the beginning. This wasn't fatalistic surrender. It was an invitation to see your life, with all its ups and downs, as harmoniously integrated into something majestic. Your disaster isn't an error in the system. It's part of the system's design, and your virtue lies in accepting your place within it. In practice, during a visualization, what does that look like? Take that professional setback. You've been passed over. You define the fear. You walk through the emotional hit. You rehearse your calm response. Then you add this final layer. After the personal narrative, you consciously zoom out. You picture your office building from above, then your city, then the continent, then the planet, a blue marble in space. You see the chain of cause and effect, economic shifts, company decisions, dynamics stretching back years. You see the infinite possibilities branching forward from this point. On that vast scale, your disappointment occupies a single pixel, one event in a universe of events. It doesn't make your feelings trivial. It puts them in a container so large it can't be overwhelmed. The personal magnitude of the event shrinks to its proper proportion. Your identity is no longer solely the person who didn't get the promotion. You are a conscious fragment of the cosmos, experiencing one of its necessary moments. So a challenge for your next session. After you walk through the fear and your response, pause, close your eyes for 30 seconds, adopt the view from above. See your life, your street, your challenge as if from a great height. See it as a tiny part of a vast, rational, unfolding whole. Then return to your own eyes. Feel the difference in the quality of your acceptance. The fear may not vanish, but it often loses its sharp, personal sting. It becomes less of an attack and more of a natural occurrence. Like a change in the weather, you are not being punished by the universe. You are the universe experiencing one of its many necessary phases. Manifesting success is everywhere now. But the Stoics did something almost opposite. They visualized failure. There's a reason for that. The modern approach says to focus only on the good outcome. To banish doubt, to attract what you want through belief. The Stoics would call that self-deception. It's not that optimism is wrong, it's incomplete. It builds a house on wishes, not on bedrock. A mindset that only expects sunshine has no shelter for rain. Seneca was blunt about this. He wrote about people shipwrecked by the first storm. Because they only sailed in their imagination on calm seas. He said we are often more frightened than hurt. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. His point was, the person who never imagines hardship is the one most shattered by it. The shock is total. The disappointment feels personal, like the universe betrayed the perfect story they wrote in their mind. Premeditatio Malorum is the corrective. It's not about rejecting positivity. It's about fortifying it. It builds a shock-absorbent mindset, one that can handle reality, the graceful and the grating. This negative visualization inoculates you against the fragility of blind optimism. You hope for the best, but you're mentally prepared for other outcomes. That preparation doesn't diminish joy, it protects it. It lets you engage with the present moment because you're not clinging to a single, perfect script. Think of two people planning a wedding. The first practices pure positive thinking. They visualize only perfection, sunshine, flawless timing, tearful smiles. They reject any other thought. The second practices Stoic preparation. They also visualize a beautiful day, but then they spend a few minutes on common hiccups. A sudden rain shower, a vendor running late, a minor family tension. They see themselves handling these with grace, adjusting the plan, focusing on the meaning, not the perfection. Now the actual day arrives and it rains. For the first person, it's a catastrophe. Their entire mental narrative is destroyed. They might fight reality all day, filled with resentment, missing the joy that's still there. For the second, the rain was a possibility already met in the mind. It's not a shock, but a circumstance. They adapt, they laugh, they remember the marriage is what matters. Their presence, their resilience is greater because their mindset had room for reality. So look at one area where you enforce strict positive thinking. A career goal, a relationship, a health journey. Ask yourself, does banishing all negative thought make you feel more secure or more fragile? What if you introduced a single, controlled dose of Stoic premeditation, not to dwell on fear, but to acknowledge a few plausible challenges, to visualize your calm response? Would that create a more stable foundation for your hopes? This isn't about expecting the worst. It's about being so thoroughly prepared that you can finally embrace the present. With both hands open, ready for whatever it holds. Stoicism wasn't something you did alone. They practiced it together, like soldiers getting ready, the real work building that resilience that's internal. But the Stoics, they gathered, in circles, in schools, in gardens. Seneca, Musonius Rufus, they weren't just writing letters to themselves, they taught. They debated. That mental training, the Premeditatio Malorum, it was part of that dialogue. They'd talk about the principles, sure, but also how to apply them. To imagined hardships, to specific things, this communal part, it had a purpose. It turned private anxiety into something else, a collective exercise. A way to solve a problem. When you voice a fear, you externalize it. You pull it out of the shadows in your mind, into the light, into a discussion. And when you share it with others practicing the same philosophy, something changes. They can offer a perspective you hadn't seen. They might suggest a different response, a virtuous one, aligned with wisdom or courage or justice or temperance. That process, it normalizes the practice. It reminds you, facing potential adversity, it's not weakness, it's not pessimism, it's the disciplined work of a rational mind. And you're not doing it alone. Think of a modern version, a small group, a mastermind, or even one trusted friend, where the agreement is supportive clarity. Each person brings one premeditation, one they're working on. They share the scenario briefly, not to wallow, to frame it as a challenge. Then the group or the friend they help. They brainstorm resilient responses. The question isn't how to avoid it. The question is, if this happens, what does the best version of us do? That shared reflection, it acts like a mirror. It reflects back your own capacity for strength, a capacity you might have missed when you were wrestling with it alone. It turns a solitary mental rehearsal into a workshop. For building character, so here's a prompt. Is there one controlled visualization you've been working with, maybe from earlier? Consider sharing the outline of it with someone you trust. Frame it not as a confession of worry, but as an exercise in preparedness. Ask them a simple question. From the outside looking in, what does a wise and courageous response look like to you? In this scenario, their perspective, it might not give you the answer, but it will almost certainly widen the lens through which you see your own resilience. In that shared space, the Stoic ideal, a community of reason, it becomes a living support, a practical one. Your inner citadel, it gains not just higher walls, but connected gates. From Roman emperors to CEOs today, there's this ability to face potential disaster. It's like a leadership superpower. It's not really about predicting the future. It's about getting your mind ready to lead through whatever version of it shows up. A leader's decisions ripple out. They affect teams, whole organizations, sometimes entire communities. That weight can be paralyzing, but there's this Stoic practice, Premeditatio Malorum. It turns that weight into a tool, into clarity. You deliberately visualize the worst plausible outcomes of a big decision. And by doing that, you perform a crucial function. You spot hidden risks before they become crises. You map out contingency plans in the calm of your own mind, not in the panic of a real emergency. And most importantly, you neutralize the emotional charge of fear. When a leader has already faced a potential failure in their imagination and rehearsed their steady response, they can guide their people with a calm assurance. That calm is contagious. They lead not from blind optimism or defensive anxiety, but from a grounded readiness, a readiness for reality. Marcus Aurelius is the archetype. He wasn't just a philosopher writing in a journal. He was the emperor of Rome. He led a vast empire through wars, plagues, political intrigue. His morning meditation, where he visualized the day's frictions, that was a leadership drill. He wrote to himself about expecting to meet ungrateful and arrogant people. This wasn't cynicism. It was strategic emotional preparation. By accepting the likelihood of difficult behavior beforehand, he could meet it with patience and reason, not with reactive anger. His equanimity under constant pressure was a direct result of this mental rehearsal. It let him make clear-headed decisions for the good of the empire, not out of personal pique or fear. Consider a modern leader facing a high-stakes product launch. The unexamined approach is to focus only on the success narrative, to pump up the team with pure positivity. The Stoic leader adds a vital layer. They carve out time before the frenzy begins to sit quietly and ask, what if this fails? They visualize the specific worst-case scenario. A critical bug emerges at scale. a key feature is panned by reviewers. Sales fall dramatically short. They feel the initial sting of that possibility. Then, crucially, they visualize their own response. They see themselves gathering the team not with blame, but with focused problem solving. They mentally walk through the steps, communicating transparently with customers, rallying the engineers for a rapid fix, pivoting the marketing strategy. By doing this, they accomplish several things. They identify potential single points of failure they can still mitigate. They prepare their own emotional state to be a pillar, not a casualty. And they build a mental blueprint for resilience, a blueprint the entire organization can follow. Take another practical example. A founder visualizes a key team member, their right hand, resigning unexpectedly. They don't just dread the thought, they engage with it. They see the resignation email. They feel the immediate shock and operational worry. Then they guide the visualization forward. They see themselves scheduling a respectful exit conversation. They mentally review the knowledge transfer plan. They consider which team members could step up and what temporary support they might need. They even rehearse the message to the rest of the company, one that balances honesty with stability. When they finish this mental session, the fear of that event is diminished. It's no longer an amorphous threat. It's a managed scenario with a series of logical, compassionate next steps. If it ever happens, the leader doesn't react from a place of panic and loss. They respond from a place of prepared, strategic stewardship. So here's a prompt for anyone in a position of responsibility, whether you're leading a team, a project, or a family. What's the decision you're most afraid to make? The strategic pivot, the difficult personnel change, the bold investment. Now, apply the leader's Premeditatio. Visualize its worst plausible outcome in clear, specific detail. Then, see yourself leading through it, not as a victim of circumstance, but as the calm, principled, and strategic guide your people need. Watch how that single rehearsal can turn the weight of leadership from a burden into a foundation. Premeditatio Malorum is really a practice of letting go. It's letting go ahead of time. We've talked about resilience, preparing for hardship, but the deeper goal is a kind of inner freedom. It's a freedom that doesn't come from controlling things. It comes from releasing your grip on them. This mental rehearsal is training for that release. You're walking through loss in your mind. You're not inviting misfortune. You're practicing non-attachment. You're teaching yourself to hold things lightly. Epictetus had the phrase for this. He said, never say, I have lost it. Say instead, I have returned it. A child grows up and leaves. You haven't lost a child. You've returned a young adult to the world. A cherished object breaks. You haven't lost a possession. You've returned its materials to nature. A job ends. You haven't lost a position. You've returned your time and talent to yourself. For whatever comes next, that shift in language is everything. It reframes possession as temporary stewardship. It acknowledges that nothing external was ever truly yours to keep. It was always on loan, and Premeditatio is the exercise that makes that truth feel real, not just an idea. So in practice, the visualization changes. Take an artist attached to new work. They fear criticism being ignored. The typical worry is about their identity being hurt. The Stoic rehearsal goes further. The artist visualizes the worst reviews. They feel that sting, but then they guide the thought to its purpose. They see themselves reading those words and letting go of the need for acclaim. They reconnect with why they created it, the joy of the process, the expression of an idea, the act itself. They mentally release the artwork like a bird from their hands. It will fly where it will. Their peace is found not in its reception, but in the fact that they gave it flight. This rehearsal isn't about becoming indifferent. It's about transferring your satisfaction from an unpredictable external outcome to a reliable internal one, your own effort, your own virtue, your own creative impulse. This applies to anything we cling to, our reputation, a lifestyle, a specific vision of the future. The rehearsal asks us to sit with the possibility of it ending, and to find, in that imagined space, the part of us that remains when the external label is gone. So choose one thing you feel a tight attachment to. Something whose loss you genuinely fear, your professional status, a relationship, a financial comfort, a personal dream. For a few minutes, perform the visualization. But with a specific intention. Don't just walk through the loss. Pay attention to the moment where you might mentally let go. Focus on the sensation of release. Not the initial pain, but the quiet after the storm passes. That space where you are no longer clinging is where your inner freedom begins. It's where you realize what you truly are cannot be taken, because it was never out there to begin with. The Stoics had one universal disaster they told us to visualize above all: our own death. They called it Memento Mori. Remember, you must die. It's the ultimate form of Premeditatio Malorum, the final rehearsal. It sounds stark, maybe grim, but to them it wasn't morbid. It was vital, the most vital tool for clarifying a life well lived. Visualizing the absolute end of your time does something. It acts like a filter. It strips things away. The trivial anxieties, the petty grievances, the endless postponements. What's left after that filter? What truly matters? Your character, your relationships, your contributions, the legacy of your actions. This isn't an invitation to fear. It's a summons to urgency, a call to stop wasting the days, this precious, non-renewable resource. To stop spending it on fears that, in the grand view, don't deserve your energy. Seneca wrote about this. He said, "We act like mortals in all that we fear, and like immortals in all that we desire." We're terrified of small losses, yet we squander years as if we had an endless supply. He told his friend to measure the value of time. He wrote that we live as if destined to live forever. Our own frailty never occurs to us. We don't notice how much time has already passed. We squander it as though we had a full and overflowing supply. His point was that remembering death is the corrective lens. It brings the distant future into sharp present focus. It asks the clarifying question: is this how I want to spend a portion of my extremely limited life? So how does this work in practice as a combined visualization? You start with the Premeditatio, a specific worldly fear, the fear of public embarrassment, or a financial setback. You walk through it, you sort control, you find your resilient response. Then you take a step further back. You place that entire scenario inside the context of Memento Mori. You do a brief meditation, close your eyes, visualize yourself at the end of your life, looking back. See yourself from that vantage point, reflecting on that specific fear you just rehearsed. From the perspective of your deathbed, how significant does that feared event seem? Does the social embarrassment you dreaded for weeks matter at all? Does the professional rejection that felt like a career ender appear as a turning point, or a lesson, or just a brief ripple in a long river? This shift in perspective is jarring. It's meant to be. It recalibrates your internal scale of importance. The small fears shrink to their proper size. The truly important things swell into focus. Acts of courage, moments of connection, the integrity of your efforts. This isn't about dismissing present difficulties as meaningless. It's about granting them their true, proportional weight. A financial worry is real. It requires practical action. But from the deathbed view, the anxiety and sleepless nights you add to it are seen for what they are. A wasteful tax on your peace. The practice gives you permission. Address the problem with diligence, but discard the paralyzing dread. It separates the necessary action from the optional suffering. So here's the profound prompt in this ultimate visualization. If you truly began to see your limited time on earth as your single most precious resource, which of your current fears would you immediately discard? As a frivolous waste of that resource, the fear of what strangers think, the resentment over a minor slight, the anxiety over a future possibility you cannot control. Memento Mori asks you to spend your life like a wealthy person spends money, with conscious intention on what truly enriches you, not like a pauper. Hoarding moments in fear or frittering them away on worries of no lasting value. This combined practice, Premeditatio grounded in Memento Mori, becomes the foundation. It ensures the resilience you build is directed toward a life of virtue and meaning, not merely toward enduring trivial storms. It turns the contemplation of an end into a guide for your beginning. Right now, fear setting. It's the same idea as Premeditatio Malorum, but updated. Tim Ferriss took that old Stoic practice and gave it a 3-column format. It's not a new philosophy, it's the same goal, to take anxiety out of your head and put it onto paper, into actions. You start with one fear that's stopping you. The first column is for defining it, not just a general worry, but the worst specific thing that could realistically happen. The second column is prevention. What can you actually do to stop that outcome? Every step you can take. The third column is about repair. If the worst does happen, how do you fix it? How do you recover? That's the Stoic part, asking, and then what? It shows you a path through the failure, so the format turns worry into problem solving. It separates what you can control, your actions, from what you can't, the fear itself. Marcus Aurelius talked about the obstacle becoming the way. This is a method to make your mindset about finding that way. Take an example. Your fear is quitting your job to start something. The first column makes it specific. You write, in 6 months, I've spent all my savings, I have no customers, people think I've failed. That's the defined disaster. Second column, prevention. Save more money first, get some letters of intent before leaving. Start building an audience now on the side. Find a mentor. Third column, repair. If it happens, take contract work to get income. Pivot the business idea. Use the new skills for a different job. Then the fear isn't a wall anymore. It's a set of tasks, things to do now, and a plan for later. You've rehearsed the setback on paper, so the prompt is this. Think of one goal you're putting off because you're afraid. Take 10 minutes, draw the 3 columns, define the fear precisely, list every preventive action. Then outline the repair steps. That's the modern exercise. It moves the philosophy from your mind to your hands. You know it's working by watching for these subtle shifts. The first sign isn't some big moment. It's a quieting in your body. You bring that feared scenario to mind, and the old tension doesn't flare up the same way. Your heart doesn't race as hard, your breath stays steadier. The physical signature of panic is muted. That's the nervous system learning through repeated exposure that this thought isn't an emergency. It's just information. Another indicator is speed. The time it takes to bounce back from a minor annoyance shrinks. A spilled coffee, a rude comment in traffic. These used to hijack your mood for an hour. Now you feel that flicker of frustration, acknowledge it, and let it pass in moments. Your recovery accelerates because you've rehearsed handling far greater things in your mind. These small things don't register with the same weight. You'll also find a new layer of appreciation settling over ordinary life. This is the gratitude that comes from the negative path. That first sip of morning coffee tastes richer because you've briefly contemplated its absence. The comfort of your bed feels more profound because you've mentally faced a night without it. This isn't forced positivity. It's a natural byproduct, a sharpened awareness of the temporary gifts around you. Finally, you'll notice a change in the quality of your anticipation. A future challenge no longer conjures a vague cloud of dread. Instead, it triggers a quiet sense of preparedness. You think about the difficult meeting, and your mind doesn't spiral into what-ifs. It calmly accesses the mental schema you've built. You have a protocol. This shift from dread to readiness is the essence of Stoic progress. It aligns with their ideal of apatheia, a state often misunderstood as apathy. In truth, it means freedom from destructive, overwhelming passions. It's not that you feel nothing, you feel everything appropriately. Fear no longer dictates your actions. It becomes a signal, a piece of data to be integrated into your plans. Consider a practical example. Before, a sharply critical email from a colleague might have ruined your entire afternoon. Your body would tense, your mind would spin with arguments, and your productivity would vanish. After consistent practice, where you've visualized receiving that criticism and rehearsed a calm response, the real event unfolds differently. You feel the initial sting, that's human, but it's brief. Almost immediately, your training engages. You take a deliberate breath. You separate the emotional tone from the content of the feedback. You move swiftly to a constructive response, drafting a reply that seeks clarification. The event is the same. Your suffering in it is dramatically reduced. To measure your own progress, try this. After a week of daily practice, take a few minutes to journal one specific, observed change in your reaction to a small, everyday stressor. Did you navigate a long line with more patience? Did bad news from a friend leave you feeling supportive instead of spiraling into anxiety? These small, documented victories are the real proof. They show the philosophy moving from an abstract idea into the wiring of your daily life, building an inner resilience that no external event can easily shake. This practice isn't a reason to give up or stop trying. Premeditatio Malorum is a rehearsal, but the show does go on. The Stoics didn't want you just sitting in your own mind, running through every bad thing that could happen. The point of the drill is to walk out onto the actual stage with clear eyes and some courage. It gets you ready to act wisely, not to just accept things passively. If you picture a problem and then do nothing to stop it when you could, you've missed the point entirely. That turns a tool for strength into a trap of acceptance. You visualize the storm so you can build a stronger ship or chart a better route, not so you can sit quietly on the deck while it goes down. The calm you're building is supposed to power real action, virtuous action, out in the world. It cuts through the anxiety so you can actually see the path you're supposed to take. There's an old Stoic, Cleans, who put this spirit of aligned action into a prayer. He wrote, "Lead me, Zeus and destiny, to wherever I'm meant to go. I'll follow without holding back, but if I refuse, I'll become a worse person and I'll still have to follow anyway." That's not surrender. It's saying you'll cooperate with the way things are going and you'll commit to walking that path with virtue. You see the direction fate might be turning and you choose to meet it, to bring your best effort to the journey itself. The visualization shows you the landscape, but you still have to walk it. Take a real example. Say you're worried a big project at work could fail. A passive use of premeditatio would be to just picture the failure, accept it might happen, and wait. The active Stoic way is different. You do the visualization, you see the presentation falling flat, the client saying no, you feel that unease, then you ask right away, what does this show me? Your mental run-through points out a weak spot in your data. It shows you're not sure about the client's main concerns. The practice has done its job. It's shown you the hidden risks inside the safety of your mind. Now the next step is obvious. You take the calm from the rehearsal and turn it into action. You make time to recheck the numbers. You ask a coworker to look it over. You write down some clear questions for the client before the next meeting. The visualization leads straight to specific things you can control. Things that might stop the bad outcome or at least put you in a better position if it happens. It turns anxiety into a list of steps, so here's the real challenge to take with you. Next time you finish a visualization, stop. Before you go on with your day, ask one direct question. What's one specific, controllable thing this showed me that I can do today to get ready or make things better? Let the mental rehearsal be the scout that comes back with a map. Then let your will be the commander who acts on that information. The Stoic life isn't lived just in thought. It's made in that space between seeing what might be and doing what needs to be done. This isn't only for adults. we can teach kids to be fearless too by giving them this framework. Because the heart of Premeditatio Malorum is resilience, and that's a skill you want to plant early when a mind is still learning how to face a challenge. For a child or a teenager, the practice isn't about deep loss. It's a simple tool for the very real storms in their world, a big test, a tryout, walking into a lunchroom alone. The goal is to give them a sense of agency before the anxiety sets in. You adapt it, you use their language, you scale it to their concerns, and you shift the focus completely away from the scary event and onto their own brave response. The Stoic idea you share isn't a complex quote. It's a simple maxim they can carry. We can't control what happens, but we can control how we handle it. That's the whole lesson made practical. Think of a child nervous about a school presentation. Instead of just saying, "Don't worry, you'll be fine," which just dismisses the fear, you guide them through a gentle visualization. You sit with them, you say, "Okay, let's play a what-if game. What's the thing you're most worried about?" Maybe they say, "I'm worried I'll forget my words and everyone will laugh." You acknowledge that, then you pivot. You say, "If that happened, what's the bravest thing you could do?" You could take a deep breath, look at your note card, and keep going. Or you could even smile and say, "I lost my place for a second, let me find it." You help them visualize not the laughter, but their own calm recovery. You help them see that their power is in that next breath, that next choice. For a young athlete afraid of missing a crucial shot, the rehearsal isn't about the ball going in. It's about what happens after it doesn't. You guide them to see themselves missing, feeling the disappointment for a second, then turning to run back on defense, still fully in the game. They learn that one moment doesn't define their effort or their value to the team. Social fears are often the heaviest. A parent or a mentor can help with a scenario. Like a friend saying something unkind, you guide the young person to visualize the scene. They hear the mean words, they feel that hurt. Then you ask, what's a way to handle that keeps your dignity strong? Maybe it's walking away calmly to find another friend. Maybe it's using a simple, rehearsed phrase, like, "That wasn't kind," and then changing the subject. The practice gives them a script for their courage, so they're not frozen in the moment. It empowers them to focus on what they can control, their own feet walking away, their own voice speaking up, instead of being overwhelmed by what they can't, which is another person's words. The spirit is always light, empowering. This is superhero training for their mind, preparing them to face dragons they can actually manage. So here's a reflective prompt if you guide a young person. What's one common anxiety they face? Is it a weekly music lesson, a social media interaction, a competitive event? How could you, in a supportive, quiet moment, guide them through a brief what-if conversation? One that starts with their fear and ends with a clear picture of their own strength in response. You're not solving the problem for them. You're handing them the tool to build their own inner fortress. One small, brave rehearsal at a time. Think of it as a lens, a way you learn to see things over time. Premeditatio Malorum is a discipline for a lifetime. Its power isn't in one session or a month of sessions. It's in the quiet effect of coming back to it year after year as your life changes. The value compounds. You're not just solving today's anxiety, you're rewiring a basic orientation toward reality. Over time, the mind gets used to facing adversity this way. A baseline tranquility becomes the norm. The sharp spikes of fear start to soften. What felt like a terrifying cliff edge becomes a manageable slope. Something you've learned to navigate. The practice evolves. It starts as a conscious exercise. You sit down, you follow the steps, but with enough repetition, it becomes almost instinctual. Part of your character, a reflex of resilience. This is what the Stoics called progress, prokopton, the lifelong journey toward wisdom, where practices like this are the core training. Not the destination, it's the daily chisel against the stone of your own character. You can see this evolution. in the contrast between a beginner and someone who's practiced for years. For someone new, each step takes effort. Defining the fear feels heavy. Sorting control is a mental struggle. Asking, and then what demands real creativity. It's work, but for the person with the discipline, the process is integrated. A moment of potential bad news, a missed call, a terse email doesn't trigger a spiral. It triggers a calm, internal assessment. The mind automatically begins sorting. This is outside my control. My control is in my breath, in my next action. The emotional storm is acknowledged, but it no longer floods the engine room. The response is steadier, almost without thought. This is the fruit of the long-term practice. Not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of an inner stability that meets difficulty with grace. Consider two people facing the same professional setback. The first, new to these ideas, might still feel the full force of the blow, but they have the tool. They retreat, do their premeditatio, and find their footing after an hour. The second, for whom this is a years-old discipline, experiences it differently. The news arrives, and within seconds, their mind has placed it within the larger tapestry of their life. They feel the disappointment, but it's contained within a landscape of acceptance. They skip the panic and move to solution mode. The practice is woven into their perception. They don't need to do it formally in the moment. They are living from its results. So the invitation is a long-term one. Commit to this practice not as a 7-day experiment, but as a permanent part of your mental toolkit. Make it a thread in your daily or weekly routine, and then, once a year, take a quiet hour to check in. Look back. How have you changed? Is your baseline anxiety lower? Do you recover from small irritations faster? When a true crisis emerged, did you find reserves of calm you didn't know you had? This annual reflection isn't for judgment. It's for witnessing your own growth. It shows you the compound interest on your mental investment. The Stoic journey is a marathon measured in decades. And this disciplined rehearsal of life's difficulties is one of the surest ways to build the endurance to run it, and the profound peace. People have objections to this. They think it's dark or dangerous. The most common one is that it's just pessimism, that you're inviting bad things by thinking about them. The Stoics had an answer for that. It's not pessimism, it's realism. There's a difference. Pessimism is believing things will go wrong and feeling hopeless about it. Realism is seeing that things can go wrong and having a plan for that. One takes your power away, the other builds a reserve of it. Seneca talked about this. He said living in a fool's paradise is dangerous. Someone who hasn't thought about poverty or pain or exile, they're overwhelmed when it happens. They are crushed by the surprise, but the person who has considered it, they endure it, they can even rise above it. So the point isn't to expect the worst. It's to be ready for a range of outcomes, so your peace isn't tied to just one perfect future. Another worry is that it'll make you more anxious, and that's fair. If you do it wrong as just uncontrolled worrying, it absolutely can increase anxiety. That's why the structure matters. The Stoic practice is controlled. It's a time-limited exposure done in a calm state. You're directing the mental movie. You're not a captive in the theater. The goal is to sit with the idea of the hardship, to let the initial fear spike subside, and then to see the path through it. When you repeat that, it doesn't make you more anxious. It gives you a sense of control. It changes the question from "what will I do" to "here is what I will do." You trade the anxiety of the unknown for the clarity of a plan. Some people say they'd rather just focus on being positive. Pure optimism feels better. The Stoic reply to that is compassionate but firm. Unchecked optimism is fragile. It's like a beautiful glass house. It shines in the sun, but the first stone shatters it. This practice doesn't destroy the glass house. It builds a sturdy foundation around it. It puts up strong shutters. Your positivity stays, but it's no longer brittle. It becomes resilient. You can hope for the best with your whole heart while your mind is prepared without fear for other outcomes. that doesn't dilute your joy. It protects it. It lets you engage with the present moment because you're not clinging to one single script for the future. Your hope is tempered, so it's unbreakable. Think of it like a fire drill. Nobody says a school is being pessimistic for having a fire drill. They don't do it because they expect a fire. They do it because fires are a possibility in reality. The drill doesn't cause fires. It prepares everyone to act calmly if one happens. And then the students and teachers go about their day more calmly, not less, because they have a protocol. They have a sense of agency. This Stoic exercise is that. It's a mental fire drill. It doesn't start the blaze. It prepares you to put it out. We started with a simple definition of an ancient practice. We walked through how it works. Premeditatio Malorum. It's not about expecting the worst. It's about preparing for reality. We looked at the psychology behind it. How mental exposure builds schemas, how it quiets the nervous system. We went through the practical steps, defining a fear with brutal clarity, sorting what you control from what you don't. Following the chain of and then what, we applied it: social anxieties, material worries, health concerns, leadership. We placed it within the larger Stoic vision. A rational cosmos, the perspective of our own limited time. The thread through all of it is this: you have the power to use your own disciplined imagination. To disarm fear, to construct an unshakable inner resilience. It's the art of turning anxiety into agency. Seneca captured the peace this brings. He wrote, "The man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." That's the promise, not a life without difficulty, but a life where difficulty finds you already standing firm. You've learned to claim sovereignty over your inner world. So no outer chaos can dictate your peace. So here's a final prompt. Look back over this. Choose one insight, one step, one application that resonated. It could be defining a vague fear, or the sorting exercise, the dichotomy of control, or the simple morning drill. Choose just one and commit to implementing it. Starting now, let that be your point of entry into a more resilient way of being. If you found value in exploring this Stoic tool, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Your experiences help build a community of practice where we can all learn from each other. And if you'd like to continue exploring practical wisdom, consider subscribing. For more insights delivered with clarity and purpose, thank you for your time and attention. Go well.